You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Monday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I am your man on the ground, Isaiah Holt, publisher of WolverinesWire through USA Today Sports Media Group. And today we are going to get into, I did a 10 reasons that Michigan will win the national championship article on WolverinesWire today. I think that today is a good day to kind of get into those types of hypotheticals, because we are in kind of a dead period here where there's not a heck of a lot going on. So let's we're going to break it down. We'll probably do something like 3-4-3 as for my 10 reasons, however we decide to do it, as we kind of wait for early signing day, while we wait for obviously actually getting into the full nitty gritty when it comes to TCU and all of that. So exciting day to get into some stuff. So let's do exactly that. So let's go ahead and start here with my number one. I mean, these aren't in any particular order. I don't have it like, this isn't like weighted or anything like that. It was just 10 things that I thought of. So we'll start with J.J. McCarthy. And in some kind of, and I was speaking to a colleague who had spoken to someone. I'm not going to get into too much what they said, but they had noted that in a way it's kind of a blessing for Michigan, and this sounds counterintuitive, that Blake Corum is out, because it kind of forced Michigan to do more. Granted, they might not have needed to do anything more than what they had been doing with Blake Corum, right? He was getting like 5.4 yards a carry. Didn't really seem to matter what other teams did for the most part. He was just able to do his thing. He was that special. But what Michigan is able to do is, and I said this in the post-game podcast after the Iowa game, what Michigan was able to do in that game and throughout was kind of a pick your poison. How do you want to face the Michigan offense? You know, Hawaii was the last team until Ohio State, pretty much, that had said, we're not going to worry about JJ as much. And then after the Hawaii game, every other team was like, 2 safeties. We're doing 2 safeties. JJ's not going to beat us. We'll take our chances with the run game. And then every other team didn't exactly do a very good job against the run game, right? I mean, some did better than others, of course, but they were like, we're going to allow our front to be able to try to stall that. And if everything goes to plan, we'll stall it out enough and you won't get into the end zone, and that will be all good and well. Where Michigan is now is that J.J. McCarthy has shown in the last 2 games what he showed earlier in the season. Maybe not passing for 100% like he was earlier in the season, which was pretty spectacular. But he is able to hurt you in multiple ways. And now he's got that confidence back when it comes to throwing. I mean, the Colston Loveland touchdown in the Big Ten championship game, I think, was his best out of all of them that we saw. But I mean, even the Ronnie Bell touchdown, the Luke Schoonmaker, I mean, these were all like the types of things we weren't seeing earlier in the season. Whereas the Ohio State touchdowns, aside from the Colston Loveland touchdown, was dropping it into a basket. These were the types of things that we all kind of expected from J.J. McCarthy, and we finally were seeing. Now, is he perfect? No. But he is the type of quarterback that can put the team on his shoulders and go. So I think that's unbelievable that we saw that in the biggest games. And that's the other big thing about J.J. McCarthy is it kind of feels like the bigger the game, the better he plays. You know what I mean? Like he's made for those games. And yes, he had a good game against Indiana or whatever, but it's the Ohio State, the Big Ten championship game, those types of games, we saw J.J. McCarthy really step things up. And I think that is important, and it's crucial if Michigan's going to beat TCU and then beat either Georgia or Ohio State. Number 2, let's go with Donovan Edwards. His emergence. I mean, he even when it seems like you're stopping Donovan Edwards, And this was one of the things I was speaking to a colleague on the sideline in the first half of the Ohio State game, and even early in the second half. He's like, why do they keep running Donovan Edwards? He's not getting anything going. I'm like, because he's the type of back that he seems to get into a rhythm, right? Like he's the first like 10 carries, he's going to get average like 2 yards a carry. But then after that, he's going to break big ones. It's just, I don't know what it is about him, but that seems to be his MO. It's not like the first carry isn't just that big one. It's more like carry number 11. And then when the offensive line is starting to really mash, get into their own rhythm, then things start to work out really well for a player like Donovan Edwards. And then on top of it, if he's healed or closer to healed, if he's wearing a slimmer cast, no cast at all by whether it's the semifinal or even the championship game, I think they'll need him as close to full strength in the championship game if possible. Then suddenly you've got your most dangerous receiver back. And he's a matchup problem for anyone because you don't know if he's going to run it or if he's going to come out of the backfield and go on a wheel route, if they're going to line him up wide. And how do you match up against him? If you match him up against a linebacker, you're going to get burned. If you match him up with the safety, maybe you stand a chance, but chances are he's better than anyone, and he's too big in a lot of ways to be able to be taken down by a corner. He's just a matchup issue, kind of like Colston Loveland, who we'll get to in a few moments. So we'll finish out segment 1 with offensive versatility, and that's where Michigan, like I said, if you want to stop the run, you can do that. Michigan will pass. If you want to stop the pass, okay, Michigan will run. Ohio State is a perfect example of that. Now, Ohio State fans want to act like that game was a fluke without noticing that the way that they were playing the Michigan offense was not intuitive. It was not conducive, rather, to what Michigan's capable of doing, right? So you loaded up to stop the run, and then Michigan passed on you. By the time you backed up off of that and said, hey, Michigan's passing on us, you backed up to keep Michigan from passing, and then they ran on you. That's kind of how a game will go against a team that can do both. And especially a team that can do both well. It's not like, I understand Ohio State's used to, we're going to run, we're going to pass, we're going to do both at the same time, and both are going to work all the time until they don't. Michigan is one of those ones like, pick your poison. We're going to do one or the other, whichever thing that we feel, we're just going to keep doing it until you can defend it. And then when you can feel like you can defend that, that's when we're going to hit big on the other thing. That's why things like play action exist, right? Oh, you're gonna stop the run. Well, now we've sucked you up because of the run, and now we're gonna pass over your heads. And that's essentially what Michigan did. There was nothing fluky about that, and I think that will really bode well against teams like TCU and maybe Georgia. Certainly, it will against Ohio State if they have to play them again, because I don't know what Ohio State's suddenly going to be able to do with its personnel that's just going to change what happened either of the last 2 years. I mean, I know they have some weird confidence for some reason. They sit there and say, hey, 16 of 18, or actually I think it's like 15 of 18, whatever. Guess what? It's not last year. It's not this year. Things change. So we'll see how that goes. But I think Michigan's offensive versatility, it plays really well because and I've said this before, it reminds me of those John Beilein basketball teams. The last one that played in the national championship, lost, of course, but still. It was that one of those things like, okay, you're going to slow down, this guy, and this guy. Well, guess what? These other two guys they're going to be able to hurt you. And that's going to bring us to another really important point here momentarily. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But before we do, listen, these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. It's so easy to create a job listing. Just go to LinkedIn, go to the add a job thing. I mean, it's not rocket surgery. So after you add your job, you can add the purple hashtag hiring frame to your profile so that you can let everyone know that you are the one that's in fact hiring. And simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. You want to finish out the year with the right member of your team to help you finish strong, just like Michigan has been able to do in this stretch with guys like J.J. McCarthy and Donovan Edwards, the two guys I just mentioned. Other guys like Colston Loveland and Will Johnson included. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you are looking for, and they help you do it faster. You just post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right. Again, kind reminder for those of you watching on YouTube, it takes about 13 days for these to post due to my current internet situation. That will certainly change in the future, but for these next couple months, know that that's going to be the case. If you're looking for your fix, you can find us anywhere you get your podcast on audio. YouTube will be up approximately 7 hours after it posts there. I think that's about right because we post these in 4K. We want it to look as good as possible. So I use the 4K cameras to get that going. Anyway, and then once we move into our forever home, things will be super top notch, dual camera setup, whole host of things to take things even up several levels from what you saw on the previous. All right, let's continue on here. So let's go with next here. And let's see, which one do I want? Let's go with players peaking at the right time, because I mentioned Donovan Edwards, J.J. McCarthy, Colston Loveland, Will Johnson. We can add Jalen Harrell, Braden McGregor, Yabioki, all guys who have made big plays. Michael Barrett has been phenomenal lately. Junior Colson seems to be elevating his game. Rod Moore has been phenomenal. I mean, it's just been like a litany of different players who have stepped up. Like the no-star defense kind of has become like a no-star entire team, especially without Blake Corum in, right? And I mean, you have a star in the offensive line. Certainly there's other players that you would consider stars, but it just seems like everyone is elevating their game and making plays at the most opportune time. Now you need that to continue to happen, right? It's going to be harder than ever these next two games. Maybe not against TCU, or at least not in my estimation. I think TCU doesn't compare to some of the teams Michigan has already faced. I could be very wrong. We'll find out in a matter of 19 days. But I do think that if it's Georgia that they face, I mean, that's the biggest level of competition step up that Michigan will have seen so far. But I think the good news is this is the issue that Michigan had in some of those previous years, where it's like it seemed like Michigan starts out looking awesome and then slowly declines. I mean, from Rich Rod on forward. And then even in the later Jim Harbaugh years last year, it seemed like things would be really good, and then they'd just be okay, and then they'd get way better, and then they'd go right back down. But right now, Michigan players seem to be playing their best football in the biggest spotlights, which is huge and important. And the fact that they can go to Columbus and beat Ohio State the way they did, the way that they can go and win a Big Ten championship against a pretty good Purdue team, the way that they did, it proves that they are not shy of the spotlight. They're not shy of the bright lights. They can go out there and do it. And I think that that's the good news, is that you have so many players that are kind of coming to their own. They're playing selfless football, and you're starting to get certain guys that are shining now brighter than they were before. Like I mentioned, Colston Loveland, Will Johnson, I think are the two big ones outside of Donovan Edwards and J.J. McCarthy, right? But I mean, even without Mike Morrison, Jalen Harrell's been really good. Braden McGregor had a bunch of really big plays against Ohio State. Yabioki has had big plays in both games, even if he's not showing up on the box score. Mozzie Smith has been phenomenal. Mason Graham has continued to step up and step forward. I mean, it's like a group of guys that are really playing well together, have complete confidence and faith in themselves. And that's going to lead us to our next point, which is confidence. This team doesn't fear any other team. They didn't go down to Columbus and say, this is Ohio State. How are we going to lose this? Like we saw that through even some of the really good teams. 2016, I know, again, Wilton Speight, I still say that if he was fully healthy, that game goes a lot differently. But it's that some of those teams that were really good still kind of had that fear factor, I feel, when they saw the Buckeyes. And I remember that, like, the feeling I had even just seeing Ohio State in person for like the first few times, 2007, And then again, like 2013 and whatever, it's just like, oh man, that's Ohio State. And I feel like that's how those Michigan teams kind of reacted too. And they'd give them a game, but there was still like not this real belief that like they could get it done. Whereas Ohio State's like, well, we're just trifling with these guys. We'll get it done because that's what we're used to doing. Tables have turned there. So it expands beyond just Ohio State, just the general confidence. Like this team, it hasn't played in a lot of close games overall when it comes down to the final score. The only ones that have been close, or really the only one that has been close, has been Illinois, and they finished that out with very decimated roster. I mean, we had guys on the field. I say we as in just overseeing the field. They had guys that were out there that were just very much not a part of the general personnel packages. So I think that really bodes well for Michigan, that there is that confidence that we're going to go out there and we're going to take business. But we do have in our back pocket, we know that if we get into a tight matchup, we can get some things done. We can finish it out. We have Jake Moody. We can make big plays. We can throw a ball to Isaiah Gash. If he doesn't catch it the first time, we can go back to him and we can make good on that. So they have a lot of things in their pocket that I think work really well. So that's going to actually add into the next thing that I have, which is the defense's second half adjustments. It's been unbelievable. I know we've talked about it ad nauseum, because we've seen it every week, but you remove the 14 points scored by Illinois. Granted, they scored 14 points in the second half. Iowa scored 14 points in the second half. I don't remember what Maryland did, and I didn't track that. But for the 7 games, if you remove from Indiana forward, if you remove that Illinois game, Michigan's allowed 2.14 points in the second half on average. They blanked several teams. Indiana. They blanked Rutgers. They blanked Nebraska. They blanked Michigan State. They allowed 3 to Penn State. They allowed 3 to Ohio State. They allowed 9 to Purdue. So it's been really unbelievable. And especially when you think about some of those other games that Michigan played. Maryland, they were up by 15. Maryland managed to cut it to 7 near the end. Was what it was. But Illinois is the only other one where the second half didn't really go Michigan's way, but still they found a way to pull it out. Jesse Minter has been absolutely phenomenal. Will he be able to do that against Georgia? That's easier said than done, but you hope if Michigan is healthy. Because again, like I mentioned, the personnel packages that we saw against Illinois, it was a very, again, seeing a bunch of guys we don't normally see in the game. I really like Michigan's chances to continue to do that, considering they've done it almost all year. So I think that bodes really well for the Wolverines. All right, let's see. Let's do one more and then move on to that and to the final one. So let's go with the line play, because all the other ones kind of work together. The last 3 work kind of together. I just think that, you have a defending Joe Moore winning offensive line. This line is even better, whether they win it or not. That will remain to be seen. And then you've got a defensive line that has been not as reliant on 2 guys. And I just mentioned all of these guys that Mozzie Smith, Chris Jenkins, Mason Graham on the interior. Heck, Rashawn Benny. We haven't talked about him. He's been in there making big plays. And this is only his second year. He's really stepped up and he's stepped in. He has been great. We've seen more Kenneth Grant lately. And then on the edges, we mentioned all of those different guys that have been able to come in, and you expect that Mike Morris is going to be back. I expect that he'll be back. It's a wealth of riches. This is a defensive line that is one of the best at stopping the run. They might not necessarily get sacks all of the time, but they do get pressure. And they are still better at getting sacks than the unit we saw last year with Aiden and Ajabo. So keeping in mind, they played 14 games last year, Aiden and Ajabo, right? Let's just take a quick look at where Michigan ranked in sacks. Michigan was 39th with 34 sacks in 14 games last year. Where is Michigan right now? Michigan right now, 13 games, 1 game less, has 2 more sacks at 36, ranked 14th in the country. As Larry David and or Jim Harbaugh would say, pretty good. All right, we've got 3 more of my points that we will get to here momentarily. But before we do, listen, at Locked On Wolverines, we believe the home should be where you and your family feel the safest, especially over the holidays. This season, give yourself and your family the gift of peace and protection with the #1 rated home security system, and that is SimpliSafe. And right now, SimpliSafe is offering Locked On Wolverines listeners 40% off of a new security system. But don't put this off. And here's why I love it. It's because no matter where you are, whether you are in Benton, Michigan, which is where I'm at now, if you're in Holly, Michigan, where I used to live, if you're in Ann Arbor, Michigan, right now I'm in the city. Ann Arbor, I was in the city. Well, I'm in the village city, whatever. Ann Arbor, I was in the city. In Holly, I was in the absolute boondocks. And guess what? I've seen crime issues happen. Well, not here, because I've been here for a week and a half, but in Holly, I lived in the middle of nowhere. And until we got SimpliSafe, we had issues. People still prey upon you no matter where you're at. So the great thing is that SimpliSafe has all these different advanced technologies, whether it's sensors that help you determine what, or help the people behind the mask determine whether the threat is real or not, whether it's the cameras, your smartphone app, you can view the cameras on your phone, all kinds of different things. All of these different aspects of SimpliSafe just work. So on top of it, though, you got the SimpliSafe professional team that works behind the scenes. They've got your back, whether it's the 24/7 monitoring that they have or the customer support staff. SimpliSafe was named the best home security system of 2022 by U.S. News and World Support for the 3rd year in a row. In an emergency 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe to capture critical evidence and verify the threat is real so you can get higher priority police response. SimpliSafe is whole home security with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door. HD security cameras for inside and out, smarter ways to detect motion that alert you only when a threat is real, and even hazard sensors that detect fire, floods, and other threats to your home. 24/7 professional monitoring service costs under $1 a day, less than half the price of traditional home security systems. With top-rated SimpliSafe app, stay in control of your system, arm or disarm, unlock for a guest, access your cameras, or adjust system settings. I cannot talk all of a sudden. Anytime, anywhere, so don't miss your chance to save big on my favorite security system. Get 40% off any new system at SimpliSafe.com/LockedOnCollege today. That's SimpliSafe.com/LockedOnCollege. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. All right, we've got just a few more minutes, which is good because we've only got a few more items. All kind of works out. Let's see what we have here. So the last 3 all kind of work in conjunction with the others. So that kind of works here. So let's see, where am I at here? Next one, easier track. An easier track to winning it all. Because yes, they have to beat TCU. No, it's not going to be easy. That doesn't mean that I don't think it will happen, because Vegas thinks it'll happen, right? Michigan is heavily favored. I mean, it's dropped from, I think, like a 10-point to a 7.5 point, but Michigan is still very much the favorite to win and go to the national championship game. I think TCU is very much in the same type of vein as what Michigan was last year, which is no matter what they say or how much they try to prove it to themselves, otherwise they are happy to be here, right? They did not have these expectations, whereas Michigan set out their goal. Okay, we have been there before. Now we know what it takes. We are going to go to the national champ. We're going to win the first game, go to the national championship, and we'll see what we can do from there. Our expectation is to win a national championship. So I think that bodes well. I think Michigan matches up extremely well against TCU, and I don't think TCU matches up well at all against Michigan. So that is what I think as far as that's concerned. Now, the track gets easier if it's Ohio State rather than Georgia, and I understand it's hard to beat the same team twice, but again, like I said, Michigan would prefer if they got to play Ohio State a second time, but even so, with Georgia, they have seen them before. It is I think Georgia has taken a step back from what they were before. And I think that Michigan could at least give them a game. I predicted in my Friday piece of the bowl game predictions, I predicted Michigan to make it there and lose. Obviously, that doesn't mean that obviously you hope that doesn't happen, is what I'm trying to say. But I think that Michigan could come up with a much smarter plan than they had against Georgia last year on both sides of the ball. I think the not having reliance on Hassan Haskins, number one, or Aiden and David Ojabo, number two, bodes well. Having weapons like J.J. McCarthy and Donovan Edwards also bodes well. Will Johnson's emergence, Colston Loveland's emergence, all these people I talked about before give you a better opportunity to be able to contend with Georgia. Have a good 60-minute game plan and execute it. Have a better game plan than Georgia has, or understand how to exploit whatever game plan they've come to play with. You could find yourself hoisting the trophy by the end of the day. The next part is they've played either Georgia or Ohio State before. I think one of the interesting stats is if Michigan does get Georgia, they would be the only, and if they beat Georgia, they would be the only team in the college football playoff era to have beaten every team in the college football that was in the college football playoff, beat all other three teams. Obviously, that's a much more difficult proposition to actually accomplish, but it's an interesting thing because they've seen Ohio State before. They beat them by 22 on the road in the Horseshoe, so and they would have to beat TCU in order to advance. And then so if they get Georgia, then that would be the next one. But I think that the fact that there is some familiarity certainly helps, right? Because now at least they kind of know what to expect, which leads into the final one, is that the team has seen what it takes firsthand. And I went in on this last week about the climb and why that's important, because it's kind of like the Michael Jordan needing to figure out what needed to happen in order to beat the Pistons. I think that's kind of where Michigan's at. Whether that actually comes to fruition or not, it is beneficial, at least for this year, that they have played against Georgia, lost to Georgia 34-11, and that all those players who are involved in watching Georgia receive the Orange Bowl trophy after the fact, those are all the guys that are the most key players for this year's team, right? J.J. McCarthy, Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards, Mike Morris, Andrell Anthony, but, maybe he comes on big here late. So they want that next crack. They will have a motivation unlike no other. It would be the last of the 2022 team goals that would have yet to have been accomplished if they get to that point. And I think that means something. And the fact that they now know what it takes to play against a team like Georgia, maybe that doesn't mean that they're good enough, right? Sometimes you know what it takes. I think about when I was playing flag football, I almost never played defense and in this league that I was in Los Angeles. And there's one game I was playing defense, and there's just this dude that I kept on facing up against, and he had probably like 4.4 speed, and I probably run a 5.5 or something ridiculously bad. And he's just blowing past me every time. I knew what it took to stop him, but I couldn't do it, right? I started backing up and stopped doing press man. I started playing back. He was still blowing by me. It didn't matter that I knew what it took. I couldn't do it. But I do think it helps when you have a team with a lot of talent like Michigan to know what it takes. That is part of it. And then I think for the coaching staff, even that could be crucial to know what it takes and hopefully get there to get over the hump. Anyway, that's my 10. That'll do it. I cannot keep this microphone in a good space. It's like off to the side here. So anyway, all right. Thank you for watching and or listening. We will be back on Tuesday. We're going to be doing it every day. So we'll find things to talk about, even though we might not have a heck of a lot for the next 2 weeks of new information, lest there's breaking news. But that'll do it. We will talk to you again soon. Thanks for watching and or listening. Peace.